Prepare yourself for a chilling exploration of one of medicine's most infamous chapters, the history and impact of lobotomies. I'm Mikel, and this is what I learned today. Let's set the scene. November 1941. Rosemary Kennedy, just 23 years old, is wheeled into an operating room. She was vibrant and full of life, but considered difficult by her influential family. The solution? A revolutionary and controversial procedure called a lobotomy. The result? Heartbreaking. Instead of relief, Rosemary was left incapacitated, unable to walk, speak, or care for herself ever again. Her story is not an outlier. It's a grim reflection of an era when science and desperation collided with catastrophic consequences. What was exactly a lobotomy? Imagine deliberately severing connections in your brain's prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and social behavior. This wasn't a rogue experiment. It was developed in the 1930s by Portuguese neurologist Antonio Egas Muniz, who believed it could alleviate severe mental illness. Incredibly, this very procedure earned Muniz the Nobel Prize in 1949. But behind the accolades lurked a horrifying result. Patients often emerged as mere shadows of their former selves. Enter Dr. Walter Freeman, the self-proclaimed evangelist of lobotomies. Freeman transformed the procedure into a macabre spectacle with his ice pick lobotomies. Yes, you heard that right. An ice pick-like instrument inserted through the eye socket to sever brain connections. It was disturbingly fast, often taking less than 10 minutes, and Freeman performed it with showmanship, like it was a show. But speed came at a dire cost. Patients lost more than their symptoms. They lost their personalities, their cognitive abilities, and in many cases, their dignity. Let's talk about Howard Dudley. In 1960, at just 12 years old, Howard became one of Freeman's youngest patients. His offense? Being difficult in his stepmother's eyes. After the surgery, Howard's life was marked by emotional scars and a haunting question: how could this happen to someone who wasn't even mentally ill? Rosemary Kennedy's story, too, sends shivers down the spine. The vibrant younger sister of President John F. Kennedy underwent a lobotomy to manage her behavior. The result? She spent the rest of her life institutionalized, a tragic symbol of medicine's failure. And it wasn't just in the United States. In Sweden, around 4,500 people, mostly women, underwent lobotomies, often for depression or anxiety. In Japan, the procedure gained traction in the 1940s, but was later banned after devastating outcomes. One haunting case involved a 24-year-old man treated for schizophrenia. While his aggression diminished, so did his ability to speak or interact socially. To understand lobotomies, we have to get into the brain's architecture. The prefrontal cortex white matter acts as a highway for neurosignals. Severing or cutting these connections might reduce some symptoms, but it also dismantles critical functions such as planning, emotional expression, and decision-making, leaving patients fundamentally altered. A particular eerie connection lies in the story of Phineas Gage. In 1848, Gage survived a railroad accident that sent a steel rod through his skull. The injury impact on his personality became an early clue about the prefrontal cortex's role, setting the stage for the flawed logic behind lobotomies decades later. You have to remember, in this time, mental health wasn't something that was well explored. There wasn't anyone really studying the brain or what the brain did or how the brain worked. So they saw this and said, the prefrontal cortex is the answer. So why did lobotomies gain such a strong popularity? Picture the overcrowded mental asylums of the early 20th century. where treatments like straitjackets and electroconvulsive therapy were the most popular use of these things. The lobotomy was seen as a miracle cure, a quick fix for societal and institutional pressures. But this so-called solution left a trail of broken lives. By the 1950s, the tide began to turn. The advent of antipsychotic drugs like Thorazine offered less evasive alternatives, signaling the beginning of the end for lobotomies. Dr. Freeman performed his last lobotomy in 1967, but not before a patient died during surgery, marking a grim conclusion of his controversial career. Today, mental health care has evolved light years beyond these barbaric practices. Modern brain surgeries are precise and guided by advanced technology, psychotherapy, medication, and non-invasive techniques like deep brain stimulation and transcranial magnetic stimulation prioritize preserving the person while treating the illness. That was a lot, I know. The history of lobotomy serves as a horrible reminder of the consequences of untested medical practices and the ethical responsibility to first do no harm. As we move forward, we must honor those whose lives were forever changed by this dark chapter in medical history. Here are some takeaways just so you're reminded. Rosemary Kennedy's tragic lobotomy eased her vibrant personality, but it left her incapacitated for life. Dr. Walter Freeman's ice pick lobotomy was shockingly performed in under 10 minutes, often with little regard for patient outcomes. Howard Dully, just 12 years old, underwent a lobotomy not for mental illness, but because his mother seemed that she had a difficult time dealing with it. Over 50,000 lobotomies were performed in the U.S. alone, leaving thousands of patients in a vegetative or profoundly altered state. The rise and fall of lobotomies underscore the dangers of desperation in medicine and the need for more rigorous ethical standards. I thought this was an interesting story. I remember growing up watching movies, and the movies were always about mental institutions and lobotomies, and I didn't know it was so popular in the 40s, the 50s, and into the late 60s. I hope you learned something. Thank you for listening today, guys. Stay curious, question everything, and remember the lessons are of history as we continue to explore the boundaries of medicine and health. I'm Mikel, and this is what I learned today. Bye.